Hello and welcome to Airfix Beyond the Basics. In this episode we take you through our complete build and finish of the B-24 Liberator Lady Be Good, focusing on efficient modular assembly, clean paint workflows, crisp decal placement and restrained, authentic weathering. We begin at the front of the aircraft with the cockpit. On our kit, the cockpit is engineered as a separate module from the fuselage to facilitate different Liberator variants. We gather all required parts for the early stages through to the rear fuselage transition, keeping small items on the sprue to simplify handling and painting. Liberator cockpit interior is varied, but the forward section is typically a darker cockpit green. We group all parts that will share that colour so they can be primed and sprayed together. Remaining parts will be painted separately and brought in later. We fit the instrument panel to the cockpit floor, add the forward sub-panel, and then locate the first bulkhead, confirming the fit with a dry run before cementing. This core assembly receives a grey primer. Several smaller parts that remain black are primed in black to save time later. We attach the seat bases to their frames and install the cockpit side panels along with the fire extinguishers. Lightly dry brushing raised details and weld seams on the cockpit sidewalls with a very sparsely loaded brush to lift the texture without overemphasis. The completed cockpit module is then located in the starboard fuselage half and glued before the port half is closed and the seam secured. We now turn to the rear fuselage and colour zoning. Forward of the bomb bay bulkhead remains dark green. The bomb bay itself is a pale ghost grey. For areas of the bomb bay we switch to zinc chromate yellow with exposed aluminium bearers. The extreme rear returns to green. We then mask and spray the forward and green sections. For the bearer area we begin with a silver coat, mask the bearer edges to preserve the metallic faces, then apply zinc chromate yellow and remove the masking to reveal crisp aluminium structures against the yellow. The navigator's area at the front is also fitted at this stage. Very little is ultimately visible, but we complete it faithfully. We continue with key sub-assemblies. We dry fit the major bulkhead into its adjoining part to ensure it cures in the correct location. This is important for alignment. The main wing spar is built up and attached to its receiving structure. Its placement is essentially self-jigging, but we still confirm engagement at the contact points. We install the lower rear floor, the area used by the rear crew, snapping it into place and checking that each added element preserves the clean fit of the fuselage halves. With the interior structure complete, we add ammunition belts to the waist positions and temporarily position the guns to ensure the belts will align later. We then seal the interior paint with a satin varnish, preparing for a controlled wash. Over the varnish we apply a panel liner wash liberally. Let it settle into the edges and recesses. Once dry we remove the excess with white spirit for definition without staining. A light dusting with a sand-tone colour knocks back any residual sheen and subtly unifies surfaces, appropriate for an airframe that operated in desert conditions. We repeat this approach through the rear interior, including the lavatory area. At this stage we join the fuselage halves. Seams are cleaned and panel boundaries re-established. This kit's engineering minimises the need for filler. Before painting the exterior, we address masking challenges. There are multiple apertures that we block with foam and tape to prevent overspray from entering the interior. We also test fit the bombs but set them aside to install after painting. This simplifies masking of the bomb bay and protects the cockpit glazing from dust. We assemble the tail and tailplane as separate units. The keyed fit allows us to paint them off the model and attach later, avoiding complex masking underneath the tailplane. The same applies to the fins. We dry fit the wings. The high aspect wings engage with keyed tabs and lock in positively, so we elect to paint wings and fuselage separately. This makes handling and masking significantly easier and still guarantees a clean final join. We proceed to exterior paint. The fuselage upper surfaces receive desert sand sprayed at approximately 15 psi, using a 50-50 ratio with paint thinner. Pre-shade by boxing in panel centres and deliberately stay off the panel edges, so that the pre-shading naturally softens into the lines as coverage builds. Because this scheme is inherently plain, the modulation is subtle but important. Once the upper colour is established, we paint the grey undersides. To capture the period repaint character accurately, we slightly soft spray the sand over the demarcation to emulate field applied overspray from converting green aircraft to desert finish. This gentle bleed over the grey feels authentic without looking messy. We then apply a protective lacquer coat to prepare for decals. We now fit the markings. The large fuselage insignia around the side door requires careful sectioning. There is no way to make this decal conform in one piece around the double curvature and the opening. We cut it into manageable sections, apply with setting solutions, and touch in any tiny gaps with matching paint. Remaining decals go on smoothly. Once set, we remove all masks and apply a flat varnish to unify the finish. With the fuselage at a stable stage, we move to the wings and undercarriage bays. We begin by sub-assembling the main gear inside the bay before closing the wing. This is significantly easier than trying to thread parts afterwards. The bay interiors and flapwells are sprayed zinc chromate yellow over grey primer. We mask and spray the thin silver rim that corresponds to the bay edge, painting from the inside for a crisp reveal. We then mask the wells and proceed with exterior colours, treating panels exactly as on the fuselage for consistent modulation. Wings receive a light gloss where needed for decals, tail insignia on the fins, fuel tank stencils in red on the wings, and the starred national marking beneath. We now paint and assemble the engines. The core engines are painted black, then dry brushed in metallic to lift cylinder detail. We paint the insides of the cowlings appropriately and leave cowlings off until weathering is complete for access. Intercoolers are finished in black, then rubbed with graphite for a subtle metallic sheen. The engines are installed later with the cowlings to lock alignment. Before closing up the wings, we complete the flap assemblies in their lowered position. Attachment points are cleaned of paint for a secure bond, and we use super glue for precise, strong joins. We now return to the engines for restrained staining. Most deposits emerge at the intercoolers, a small amount also collects on the upper cowling lips. Using dry pigments, we create fine streaking of the vent and along the flow lines beneath. Mindful that this specific airframe was relatively new in service and not heavily weathered. Less is more here, so we keep it convincing and understated. We install the pre-assembled main undercarriage. Access for glue is limited, so the reliable points are the main leg and its primary strut, which is more than adequate once the geometry is engaged. For the wheels, the hubs and tyres are separate. We paint these separately and then press fit the cone keyed hubs, free for a crisp edge. The instructions call for grey hubs. We finish them in silver for a slightly brighter mechanical look. Because there is substantial nose ballast called for in the instructions, nearly 50 grams in total, there is a stress-free alternative. For this model, we install the rear ladder as a permanent support. This shifts the standing load off the delicate nose leg and prevents tail sitting without adding mass to the nose. We fit the ladder carefully and trim its feet later for a perfect stance once the wings are glued. We glue the wings to the fuselage using super glue inside the wing root box. This method avoids visible squeeze out on the exterior and creates a very strong structural join. The fit is excellent and requires no further correction. With the model on its legs, the overall presence becomes clear. The B-24's wingspan is impressive, and the modular strategy has paid dividends in finish quality. We now turn to the clear parts and armament. We pre-paint the interior frame colour, green, beneath the exterior camouflage so the canopy reads correctly inside and out. The top turret is assembled and test fitted. The gun cradle is painted separately and added before the clear cap is installed. The rear turret is more complex, but follows the same approach. Internal gun assembly painted first, then the clear fairings added. Both turrets press fit securely and do not require additional bonding. We now move to the final external stores. The bombs are assembled and painted with stencil decals applied to each. When fitting to the racks, we prepare mirrored left and right sets so fin orientation is correct. Planning this prevents a mismatch at the last moment. The pair of bomb bay doors is slightly tapered. We identify those parts and locate them at the rear, with the two identical doors forward. The bomb bay is now complete. Propellers are painted, yellow tips added, and blade decals applied. We give the hubs and blade roots a light metallic dry brush to suggest service handling. A final pass of very restrained panel liner around the engine nacelles and a little powder at the exhaust trails completes the exterior. At this point the build is complete. The wings and tails require minimal adjustment thanks to the precision of the tooling. The modular engineering allowed us to paint wings, tails and fuselage as discrete units and join them cleanly at the end. While much of the interior detail is only partially visible through the doorways and gun positions, completing it properly elevates the end result and deepens understanding of the Liberator's structure. For Lady Be Good, the desert finish benefits from panel modulation and a soft realistic overspray at the camouflage demarcation to reflect field repainting over the original green. With decals set, masks removed and a unifying flat coat applied, the model presents as an authentic, service-fresh B-24 with subtle operational wear, never over-weathered. This has been a rewarding, involved build with a significant parts count and several sub-assemblies that benefit from planning ahead, particularly the undercarriage, flaps and turrets. The kit's fit and modularity makes it a pleasure to handle from start to finish. Thank you for joining us in this Beyond the Basics build of the B-24 Liberator Lady Be Good. As always, please like and subscribe, and happy modelling.